A Jackson man has been convicted of shooting and killing his ex-girlfriend during a home invasion 3 years ago. 33-year-old Zevrion Brent was found guilty today of second-degree murder in the death of Terencia Jackson. He was also convicted of aggravated assault for shooting her boyfriend at the time, Henry Perry. In June 2022, Jackson police say Brent forced himself into a home on Fleetwood Drive and attacked the couple. Brent is scheduled to be sentenced later this month. He faces up to 60 years in prison.
June 7th, 2022, 3:52 a.m. The front door of apartment 312 on Fleetwood Drive bursts open. The wood splinters apart as a man storms inside with a gun in his hand and rage in his eyes. He doesn't stop to argue. He doesn't stop to explain. He walks straight down the hallway toward the bedroom where 26-year-old Terencia Jackson is asleep beside her new boyfriend, Henry. Within minutes, gunshots will tear through the room. Blood will stain the sheets, and by dawn, Jackson police will be standing over a scene that looks like a war zone. This wasn't a stranger breaking in. It was a man who once knelt before her with a diamond ring, a man who once promised forever. His name was Zevrion Brent, her ex-fiancé, a man who couldn't accept goodbye. To the morning news, it sounded like another tragic headline: a woman shot and killed in South Jackson. But to those who knew her, she was so much more. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a devoted worker, and above all, a mother whose entire world revolved around her little girl. This story isn't just about how she died, but about who she was, what she built, and how everything collapsed when obsession replaced love. Born on May 12, 1996 in Jackson, Mississippi, Terencia was known by everyone as Munchie. It was a nickname that captured her spirit long before tragedy struck. She was the second-born in a large family of 8 children. In a household with 4 sisters and 3 brothers, she managed to stand out because she was the one who always brought people together. Her siblings describe her as the connector, the one who kept conversations alive, who laughed the loudest, who found a way to add lightness even on hard days. She had a playful side too, often pulling small pranks on her stepfather, McDuffie, as a way of showing affection. But nothing in her life shone brighter than her daughter, little Zerencia. Every photo, every video, every caption on her social media told the story of a mother completely devoted to her child. She celebrated every milestone, every smile, every tiny achievement. For Terencia, motherhood wasn't a role she filled. It was the purpose of her life. Outside of family, she built a life with discipline and meaning. She worked for UPS, where her colleagues saw her as reliable, hardworking, and full of energy. Faith guided her, anchored in her membership at Jehovah Jireh Church. Friends said her spirituality wasn't just about Sunday worship, but about the way she lived daily life and the way she approached challenges. She was the kind of person who blended joy, responsibility, and resilience all in one. She had dreams that reached beyond Jackson. She loved to travel whenever she could, collecting memories and moments, but always staying rooted in the love of her family. For a while, it seemed like her personal life was complete too. When she began dating Zevrion Brent, the relationship appeared strong from the outside. On social media, the images told a story of dates, laughter, and a couple building a future together. Friends described those first months as a fairy tale. When Zevrion proposed at her birthday celebration, dropping to one knee with a ring box, the room erupted in cheers. To outsiders, it looked like the beginning of a lifetime commitment. But those who look back now notice something small but haunting in that moment: a pause. Before she said yes, she hesitated. Maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10, but long enough to raise questions in hindsight. At the time, people brushed it off as nerves, but now it feels like the silent scream no one heard. After the proposal, things started to shift. The couple's playful banter online faded. The frequent outings slowed down. Those closest to her noticed her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. Conversations became more guarded. The adventurous, open version of her seemed quieter, more withdrawn. She didn't share the details, not even with close friends, but her demeanor spoke volumes. What had once felt like love now carried the weight of control. She was private about her struggles, but eventually she decided she couldn't keep going. She ended the relationship, believing she was choosing freedom and peace. But experts call this period separation violence, the most dangerous time for a woman leaving an abusive partner. Statistics show a woman is 75 times more likely to be killed when leaving than if she stays. For Terentia, leaving felt like safety. In reality, it was the start of countdown. After ending things with Zvirian, she allowed herself to hope again. She met Henry, and everyone noticed the difference. With him, her smiles were genuine. The guarded look was gone. There was lightness in her laughter. He wasn't intimidated by her daughter. He welcomed her as part of their lives. He helped with bedtime, with schoolwork, and stepped into the role of a father figure naturally. Photos from this time showed real joy, unposed and unfiltered. Friends say she seemed like herself again, happier, freer. For the first time in months, she wasn't surviving a relationship, she was enjoying one. But while she was moving forward, Zvirian was spiraling. His criminal record already told a troubling story. Felony charges, drug possession, multiple arrests for weapons. Again and again, the system caught him, then released him. Each time, the charges grew more serious, the weapons bigger. Less than a year before Terentia's murder, a judge dismissed one of his cases at the request of a probation officer, putting him back on the street with the same patterns and the same rage. That decision would become one of many failures that left Terentia exposed to danger. By early June of 2022, her new life with Henry seemed stable. They had routines, dinners together, quiet evenings with her daughter. Henry was accepted by her family. It felt like a new beginning. On June 6th, Henry posted a photo of them lying in bed together. They looked tired but content. The caption was simple. "This was our last moment before we went to sleep, not knowing the devil was plotting on us." That post would later feel prophetic. While they were planning tomorrows, someone else was planning to take those tomorrows away. What Terentia didn't know was that Zvirian had been watching. He had studied her routine, memorized her address, and tracked her movements with precision. To him, her leaving wasn't an ending, it was betrayal. As midnight passed and the early hours of June 7th arrived, Terentia and Henry drifted into sleep, unaware that the man she once promised to marry was outside, armed and ready. The locks on the door gave her a false sense of safety. At 3:52 a.m., that illusion shattered. The door burst open, and the past she had tried to leave behind came crashing violently into the present. The moment the door splintered, the bedroom turned from a place of rest into a place of terror. Terentia woke to see her worst nightmare framed in the doorway. Standing there was her ex-fiancé, a man who had once promised to protect her, but who now held a gun pointed in her direction. Henry, startled awake beside her, realized instantly that this wasn't a burglary. This was personal. Before words could even be exchanged, the gunfire began. Shots rang out, sharp and deafening in the confined space, echoing off the walls as bullets tore through the room. Terentia was hit multiple times. She cried out, her body collapsing under the force of the shots. The bed that had moments ago cradled her in sleep was now soaked in blood. Henry, wounded but not defeated, fought back. With the instinct of survival and the reflexes of a man who refused to let her die without resistance, he grabbed his own weapon and returned fire. The room erupted into chaos, two men firing, a woman screaming, shell casings scattering across the floor. In seconds, what had been a bedroom transformed into a battleground. Henry's bullets found their target. Zvirian staggered back as multiple rounds tore into him. Wounded, bleeding heavily, he realized this wasn't going the way he had planned. His rage had brought him here to kill, but his obsession hadn't prepared him to die. He turned and fled, stumbling through the apartment and out the shattered door, leaving behind carnage and the woman he once claimed to love gasping for her life. The sound of his footsteps faded into the night, but the damage he left behind would echo forever. Henry lay injured, his body bleeding from gunshot wounds, but his mind locked onto one thought: survive long enough to tell police who did this. Terentia, though hit multiple times, was slipping fast. Her breaths came shallow, her body growing weaker with every second. At 4:04 a.m., police arrived to a scene that stunned even seasoned officers. The apartment was littered with shell casings, furniture overturned, the air heavy with the smell of gunpowder. In the bedroom, they found Terentia, gravely wounded, and Henry, shot but conscious enough to speak. His words were clear: Zverian Brent did this. That one sentence turned a chaotic scene into a manhunt. Outside, neighbors stood in shock as flashing lights filled the street. Some had been awakened by the sound of gunfire, others by the shouts of first responders. For them, this was no longer just a story on the news. Violence had arrived on their doorstep, and the reality of it was hard to ignore. Paramedics worked quickly, rushing both victims to the hospital. Terentia's injuries were severe, too severe to overcome. At 4:37 a.m., the doctors pronounced her dead. She was just 26 years old. Henry survived his wounds, carrying both the physical pain and the emotional scars of that night. His statement would become one of the key pieces of evidence in the case, proof that this wasn't a mystery intruder, but a targeted attack by a man driven by jealousy and rage. Meanwhile, Zverian was bleeding somewhere in Jackson. The bullets Henry fired had done their job, but not enough to stop him completely. Investigators knew that with wounds that serious, he couldn't stay hidden for long. A man shot multiple times would need medical care, and the net they cast was simple but effective. Monitor every hospital emergency room in the city. It was just a matter of time before he showed up. The search intensified when another name surfaced: Vita Valentine, a 28-year-old woman later accused of helping him hide. Phone records and witness statements suggested she had been in contact with him before and after the shooting, playing a role in his attempt to evade capture. By dawn, the neighborhood around Fleetwood Drive looked like a crime scene out of a movie. Yellow tape sealed off the street. Investigators marked bullet casings, and the coroner's van pulled quietly into the driveway to take away Terentia's body. The weight of what had happened settled over the community like a heavy fog. A mother gone, a child left without her, a family shattered, and a system that many believed had allowed it to happen. News outlets scrambled to report the story. Headlines blared: woman shot in South Jackson, home invasion turns deadly, fiancé on the run after brutal attack. The details were still coming in, but one thing was clear: this wasn't just a random crime. It was the result of a relationship that had crumbled into obsession, and of a man with a long history of weapons and violence who never should have been free. At the hospital, doctors fought to keep Henry alive. Despite his wounds, he had enough strength to provide a detailed account of what happened. His bravery in speaking out so quickly meant there was no doubt about who the suspect was. Police issued bulletins with Zverian's name and description. The city was on high alert. Somewhere out, there was a man with multiple gunshot wounds, desperate, dangerous, and willing to involve others in his escape. It didn't take long for police to catch a break. Within 24 hours, investigators arrested Vita Valentine, charging her with accessory after the fact to capital murder. Her arrest only fueled questions. Why would she help him? What kind of loyalty drives someone to protect a man who had just killed his ex-fiancée in cold blood? The details of their relationship remain unclear, but her choice would cost her freedom. And then, the moment investigators expected finally came. Staff at the University of Mississippi Medical Center contacted authorities about a man who had been admitted with multiple gunshot wounds. He matched the description perfectly. It was Zverian Brent. After a violent attack that left one woman dead and himself badly injured, he had turned up in the very place investigators had been watching from the beginning. The irony was bitter. Terentia was in the morgue, while her killer received medical care that would keep him alive long enough to face justice. When he was strong enough to stand before a judge, Zverian appeared in court still weak, wearing a hospital gown and flanked by deputies who took no chances. He was charged with murder and attempted murder. His attorney requested bond, but the same judge who had dismissed his earlier cases months before had no hesitation this time. Bond denied. Returned to custody immediately. For Terentia's family sitting in the gallery, it was a small measure of justice, but no decision could ever fill the void her absence created. The community of Jackson struggled with questions that went beyond the crime itself. How many chances had the system given this man before he finally killed someone? How many warning signs had been ignored? How many other women were out there, living in fear of partners with similar histories, hoping the system would protect them? This wasn't just about one man's violence. It was about a pattern that experts have been warning about for years. The deadly risk that comes when women leave abusive partners. As news spread, support groups for domestic violence survivors began speaking out. Advocates used Terence's case to highlight the need for stronger protections, stricter enforcement of gun laws, and a greater awareness of separation violence. Her death became not only a personal tragedy, but a symbol of a larger issue. For those who loved her, the grief was personal, but for the city, her name became a rallying cry. By the end of that first week, Jackson had moved from shock to anger. A beloved daughter, sister, and mother was gone, and the man responsible was finally behind bars. But the story was far from over. Because for her family, for Henry who survived, and for her daughter who would grow up without her, the real struggle was just beginning. When Terence Munchie Jackson was laid to rest, the loss was felt far beyond the walls of her family home. Her siblings spoke of an emptiness that no words could fill. In a family of 8, she had been the spark that pulled people together, and now every gathering carried a silence where her laughter used to live. Her parents, Antoinette Jackson and Terrence Wack, faced the unimaginable task of burying a daughter they had raised, protected, and celebrated for 26 years. For them, the grief was not just about the violence of that night, but about the life she should still be living. Raising her daughter, working at UPS, sharing her faith, pulling family pranks, and planning a future that would never arrive. For Henry, the man who had survived the attack, the wounds went deeper than the bullet scars on his body. He carried survivor's guilt, the crushing thought that he had lived while the woman he loved did not. To keep her close, he made a permanent choice. He went to a tattoo artist and had her smile inked on his skin, a reminder of the woman who had changed his life. When he posted the photo of the tattoo, his caption was simple: "Got in my feelings, so I went and got it finished." But beneath those words was the pain of a man who had lost not only his girlfriend, but also the future they were building together. Every time he looked at the ink, he saw her, but he also saw the night he couldn't save her. For little Zorencia, the grief was the most cruel of all. At such a young age, how could anyone explain what had happened? How could anyone put into words why her mother wasn't coming home? For children, absence feels endless. Those close to her spoke of the impossible task of explaining that the person who was supposed to love her mother had taken her away forever. Every milestone, every school play, every birthday would now carry a shadow, the missing presence of the woman who had once celebrated every smile. As the family buried their daughter, the justice system prepared to face the man who had destroyed so many lives. Zverian Brent, recovering from his wounds, was transferred from the hospital to jail. In court, his presence sparked raw emotion. Family members watched as he stood there in shackles. The same man who once placed a ring on Terence's finger, now accused of her murder. He was charged with murder and attempted murder, and his request for bond was denied. For the first time, the same judge who had once dismissed his earlier cases without hesitation now declared him too dangerous to walk free. The irony was not lost on anyone. Had that same judge recognized the danger earlier, Terence might still be alive. The legal proceedings dragged on, as they so often do. Paperwork, hearings, continuances, all while her family waited for justice that felt unbearably slow. Each court date was another wound, another reopening of the night they wanted so badly to forget. For them, justice would never be enough. No sentence, no verdict could bring her back. But still they came. They sat in the gallery, they watched the man who had taken her from them, and they prayed for accountability. Outside the courtroom, the community of Jackson was reckoning with hard truths. Domestic violence experts pointed out that Terence's case was not unique. Across the country, women who try to leave violent or controlling partners face the highest risk of death. Separation violence, they call it, and the statistics are staggering. A woman is 75 times more likely to be killed during or after leaving an abusive relationship than while staying. Terence's case became a painful example of that reality. Advocates demanded change, stricter gun laws for offenders with felony records, better enforcement of protection orders, more resources for women trying to leave dangerous partners. They argued that the system didn't just fail Terencia once on the night she was killed. It failed her in the years before, when Zverian's repeated arrests for drugs and weapons were dismissed, when judges released him instead of holding him accountable. Each dismissal was another brick in the path that led directly to her death. The conversations spread beyond Jackson. Her story was picked up by advocacy groups across the state, who used it to shine a light on how many women live in silence, fearing what will happen if they try to leave. They organized support groups, candlelight vigils, and policy forums. They held up photos of Terencia at rallies, reminding lawmakers that behind every statistic is a real person, a mother, a daughter, a woman with dreams and responsibilities. Her name became not just a symbol of tragedy, but also a call to action. Inside her own home, her absence was impossible to ignore. Her siblings described group chats that would forever show her as offline. Holidays came and went with one chair empty. Her parents faced nights of unbearable quiet. Henry struggled with healing not only from his physical injuries, but from the loss of the life he had started to build with her. For him, survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant carrying her memory forward in every choice he made. As the case moved forward, another figure remained in the spotlight. Vita Valentine, the woman accused of helping Zverian after the murder. Her arrest baffled many. Why would anyone risk everything to protect a killer? Phone records revealed communication between the two, both before and after the shooting, suggesting she had made a deliberate choice to help him hide. For her, the consequences would be life-altering. She faced her own charges and the possibility of years in prison. Her loyalty to him, whatever its roots, had tied her future to his crimes. The community asked hard questions. How could this have been prevented? Why was a man with multiple weapons charges free to plan such violence? Why are women like Terencia forced to navigate systems that so often fail them? For many, the answers were clear. Laws had to be strengthened, judges had to be more accountable, and communities had to take red flags seriously. A man monitoring his ex, showing up uninvited, owning illegal guns, making threats. These were not just personal issues, they were emergencies waiting to explode. For those closest to Terencia, her death was unbearable, but they clung to her legacy. Her mother spoke of her as a joyful spirit, someone whose smile lit up every room. Her siblings remembered her as the glue that held them together. Friends described her as playful, loyal, and kind. Her coworkers at UPS spoke of her commitment, her reliability, her ability to brighten even the hardest workday. Her church remembered her faith, her dedication, her service to others. And everyone remembered her devotion to her daughter, a devotion that never wavered. Today, her story lives on in conversations about domestic violence, about the failures of the system, about the importance of recognizing warning signs. It lives on in the tattoo on Henry's skin, in the memories of her siblings, in the milestones her daughter will reach with family by her side. It lives on in every woman who hears her story and decides to seek help, in every lawmaker who considers stronger protections, in every community that learns to take separation violence seriously. Rest in peace, Terencia Munchie Jackson. Your story is not forgotten. It will continue to save lives, to open eyes, and to remind us all of the cost of ignoring warning signs. The door that was kicked in on Fleetwood Drive can never be repaired, but the doors opened by telling your story. The doors to awareness, to resources, to safety can save countless others. Justice for you is not only in the courtroom, but in the lives that will be protected because your story was told.